Hello and welcome to another edition of the NBA Outlet presented by OTGBasketball.com. Make sure you're following OTG on Twitter at OTG Basketball. Also hit that subscribe button. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me as always, Mr. Podcast, Harris Wichard. What's up, Harris?
What's up, man? I like the introduction. Excited to be back with you and breaking down some player rankings and everything. Playoffs around the corner, so exciting time.
Yeah, honestly, this is a pretty exciting week. The playoffs are right there, and there's a lot of seedings that are still up for grabs. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. But before that, we're going to get into the OTG Rankings page. If you guys don't know, every month over at OTGBasketball.com, we do top 5 rankings: point guard, shooting guard, small forwards, power forwards, and centers. And we also do the power rankings for the teams as well. So check that out every month. But let's get started with point guards, Harris. Number 1, Russell Westbrook. Number 2, James Harden. Number 3, Steph Curry. Number 4, John Wall. Number 5, Isaiah Thomas. Initial thoughts.
We've talked about it before. I don't necessarily have a problem with it because of the seasons those guys are having. You know how I feel about Steph. And, I obviously like Irving too, but it's hard to ignore what IT has done and the seasons those guys are having. So I understand if it's me starting a team versus how guys are playing at the moment. I think my opinions would be a little different. And obviously I like Kyrie also, and not to, forget about guys like Lowry, who's been out also. But it's tough. But I think those guys definitely deserve IT deserves recognition to be a top 5 PG this year.
Yeah, and I would say I would agree with it for right now. Westbrook at number 1, the numbers that he's putting up, I think him and Harden you could probably swap. Steph is kind of getting his contention back for that number 1 spot too, and John Wall's having a great season. I mean, number 5, you could argue Isaiah Thomas out, but there's been a lot of injuries at the point guard position. Like we talked about off-air, Harris, Isaiah does a lot for that team scoring-wise. It's not like they have a ton of weapons, so him scoring 30 a night means a lot, and he puts up big numbers in the fourth quarter. So I think he's growing on me a little bit. I was a little bit harsher, I think, on him last time. But with all the injuries around the league, like Lowry just coming back, Chris Paul's been banged up a lot. Dame Lillard probably is somebody that you could consider for number 5, especially with the stretch he's had post-All-Star break.
It's hard to imagine because I came up with like my own top 5 last year, and I think CP3 was in it. I think Kyrie was in it, and I think Lillard was in it. It's just, Harden wasn't really considered a point last year, but it's just hard to imagine a top 5 without all 3 of those guys. It just goes to show you what kind of depth you're seeing at that position right now.
Exactly, and it's like there's so many great point guards at the position that, like, the talent-wise from month to month, it's switching, who's having a better season. Like you said, overall, like starting with a team, these would probably be a little bit different, but for this rankings, I think this is about right. Shooting guard. There's going to be somebody on here that made, a big jump. Number 1, DeMar DeRozan. Number 2, Klay Thompson. Number 3, Devin Booker. Number 4, Bradley Beal. And number 5, CJ McCollum. Bradley Beal and McCollum actually tied, so they're both tied for 4th voting-wise.
Well, is this on a weighted 70-point scale right now to have Booker?
I guess so. I was very surprised. I think Booker may have jumped into our rankings like once all season at the number 5 spot. For him to come at number 3, I think that's 70-point game. But, I mean, these are current rankings, so I kind of understand the voting, but I'd probably put him down at number 5.
Yeah, with Beal and McCollum.
Yeah.
So, who'd you say was 2 again?
Klay.
Okay, so DeRozan to Klay, and then Booker, McCollum, Beal, or Beal, McCollum.
Yeah, I would probably boost up McCollum and Beal. I mean, first off, they both have more ability all around. Obviously, Booker has a bright future. We don't really know exactly how great he's going to be, but, we kind of have a better idea what Bradley Beal and CJ McCollum are doing right now. And shout out to DeMar DeRozan. He's been holding down that number 1 spot pretty much all year, and he's been a monster, and no one really shows any love for him.
Did you see the Kobe thing that he had with I think his new shoe or something? And I know his relationship with Kobe, that DeRozan grew up in Compton, so obviously, Kobe was his idol. A lot of the younger players will point to Kobe as their idol, but his shoe is inspired by that game that Kobe had in '97, his rookie year playoff game against Utah, the air ball playoff game, and just the bounce back and the overcoming adversity. And so DeRozan and Kobe's relationship, and I thought it was a cool thing, interesting to see that Kobe played that significant of a role in DeRozan's life, and he's honestly been steady all year. He's not talked about a ton as much as he was in the beginning of the year, but he's been, to have that team where they are without Lowry is impressive.
Yeah, and I mean, you can kind of see a lot of Kobe in DeRozan's game, with the footwork that he has in the mid post that he does a lot. I think, the reason that he doesn't really get talked about as much is because he's not like a huge 3-point guy. He's more that mid-range scorer and like works in the paint, gets to the free throw line. But I definitely appreciate what he does for Toronto. And like you said, Lowry's been out and he's kind of steadied that ship, and the Raptors are in that 3rd seed right now.
Yeah, over Washington.
Yeah, so I mean, that's pretty good work. Onto the small forward position, number 1, LeBron James, number 2, Kawhi Leonard. Then we have another tie, Jimmy Butler at 3 and Giannis Antetokounmpo at 3, and number 5, Paul George. KD did not make the cut because he was injured the whole month. So,
yeah, he'd be 2.
Yeah.
So who did you just say got into the top 5 because of Durant's absence?
I think Paul George.
Right. Okay, well, he definitely deserves to.
And he's kind of stepped up, and he's had some harsh comments about his team, and he's come out and play hard afterwards. So I think you appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I always kind of saw Butler as a 2. It's hard to I mean, he definitely is.
Yeah, he's been playing 3 all year,
Yeah.
But I think obviously he could transition back to the 2 if he had to at any point in his career. But right now, with the season that he's having, and all of his starts are at 3, so.
With the season that the Greek Freak has had, I'd give him the slight edge. I would take him at 3, and I'm pretty much okay with the rest. I mean, I don't know if anybody really gets snubbed here.
Yeah, I don't think you can really make much of an argument for anyone else. When Kevin Durant comes back, you probably bump Paul George out, to be honest, and that's that. Now onto power forwards and centers, where it's going to get a little interesting. We got some New York love in here, so.
Oh yeah, the Kristaps love.
Number 1, we have Anthony Davis, he's been a lock all season, and there's not really anybody can say anything about that. Number 2, Draymond Green. Number 3, LaMarcus Aldridge. Number 4, Blake Griffin. And number 5, making his first appearance, Kristaps Porzingis. Some of the reason Porzingis is in here too is Paul Millsap was injured most of last month, so he didn't get many votes.
Right. I know I saw there was a Hawks fan on Twitter that was ready to tear apart the site.
Yeah, arguments with him before, so.
Here you go again. I mean, I've expressed some of my disappointment in Porzingis. You've come to his defense about, the position that the franchise is in. I've wanted to see a little bit more out of him when Melo was out and just having a little bit better of a sophomore season. It's not like I'm down on him. It's the fact that like he's not the guy anymore, can't be the guy going forward. I just expected a little bit more out of him and his development, but he's in a little bit of a toxic environment, and hopefully that gets better around him, so he could kind of develop the way I want him to, and I think he can.
Yeah, I mean, I actually was kind of surprised he made this jump. Like he's been kind of inconsistent this year, and he hasn't really got many votes in the past few months. So like I was surprised. I thought maybe somebody like Kevin Love, who's come back from injury, he's done okay. So I mean, that fifth spot is really up for grabs. But like you said, I kind of expected a bigger year from Porzingis as well. Obviously, what I've mentioned in the past, like you said, the Knicks really haven't set him up for success. But going forward, I think the team is really going to start to revolve around him, and you'll see more growth next season.
Well, yeah, I think at this point right now, I would slide Love in there, but because he has been out a little bit too. But I think he's been back enough where he would be able to make this jump into the top 5. And also, I think Griffin is going to have he's been up and down, but I think he's going to have a real good postseason. I would take him higher than he is right now. You said that it was Green, and then who was after Green?
Aldridge.
Yeah, Griffin.
The only thing with Griffin is he's been a little bit inconsistent since returning from injury. A lot of people have been like, expecting Blake to kind of get back into form, and he hasn't had that same jump that he's had in the past, the explosiveness.
I think he's going to have a good playoff. I can't wait to see that Utah. That's going to be one of my favorite series of the first round, potentially, because it's most likely going to happen. But we'll get to that later on. But that just the thought of Utah and the Clippers is enticing.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I mean, it's a big postseason for the Clippers. And like you said, Blake, 2 seasons ago, he had a huge postseason, so maybe he could do something like that. But on to the center position. Karl Anthony Towns is now the number 1 center in our rankings. Number 2, DeMarcus Cousins. Number 3, Rudy Gobert. And number 4, Hassan Whiteside. And number 5, Brook Lopez.
Oof.
So I'll let you jump in the rankings first.
I don't really have a major issue with it as far as as Brook goes. I think he's. I mean, obviously the Nets only have 19-win team, but I think he's been the one, steady piece most of the season. I don't necessarily. Do you think anybody's robbed here? Is DeAndre?
I mean, I didn't personally vote for Brook. Like, I was really surprised that he got in the top 5 because he really doesn't get that much love. But he had a really good March. The Nets won like 9 games. He had a ton of threes. People are starting to realize his offensive game is pretty unique. I actually put DeAndre at number 5, but I'm okay with Brook obviously being at number 5. His rebounding is pretty bad. But, I mean, as a rim protector, he's not bad. He's just slow defensively. If you put him in position to succeed, he's not a terrible defensive player. And offensively, he can put up points. And he really only plays like under 30 minutes a game most of the time.
Yeah, DeAndre was really the only name that, comes to mind of guys that have been consistently in there most of the year. We didn't hear Jokic's name though.
Yeah, Jokic has got a few votes in the past. So I think some people have also voted for him at power forward because he kind of goes back and forth a little bit. So yeah, I mean, I could definitely see Jokic at number 5 because his ability to pass the ball kind of makes him really unique.
Yeah, there's some decent bigs that you can make the argument for that should be in there over Brook, but it's not a catastrophe at 5.
Yeah, I would say
a top 8 center.
Yeah, and I would say the one thing that people probably are starting to understand with Brook is when your center can shoot threes at the rate that he can shoot threes, it is 100 times easier to drive in the paint. There's nothing locking up the paint, and they really can't give him like a step outside because he's proven that he can hit down the shot consistently. So it's been a nice season for him and the Nets to kind of develop that. But now let's talk about postseason. I'm not talking about the New York teams. Let's talk about teams that are going to be in the playoffs, and let's talk about the Eastern Conference first. So spots 5 through 9, really, there still can be a ton of movement. Obviously, 3 and 4 can move as well because the Raptors and Wizards are only a half a game apart. But we're going to talk about 5 through 9. So at number 5, we have the Hawks, 6, Bucks, 7, Bulls, Pacers, 8, Heat, 9. And these teams are all separated by 3 games. So we're going to go through each team, and we're going to kind of look at the schedule that they have going forward.
Okay.
So first off, we'll look at the Bulls, and they probably have the easiest schedule. They have the Nets tonight, the Magic, and the Nets again.
They're going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, we could probably – I mean, it'd be pretty hard to say that they're not going to go 3-0. So I'm ready to pretty much lock them in the playoffs. Next team we'll look at the Pacers. Their schedule's not too bad either. They have the Magic, the Sixers, and then the Hawks. Now, it's probably likely that the Pacers could easily go 2-1. 3-0 is not out of the possibility, so there's some possible movement in this. Then we can take a look at the Heat, and they're at number 9. This is a team that's not currently in the postseason, and they got a pretty tough schedule. Their schedule's not helping them out. They have the Wizards, the Cavs, and the Wizards. So
the Wizards are going to play their guys.
Exactly, because I just mentioned a minute ago, they're only a half a game behind Toronto for that 3rd seed. So it's really tough to see Miami winning 2 of those games, to be honest. The one break they maybe could get is, maybe they beat the Wizards once and then they get the Cavs to rest their players.
Yeah, and the Heat were, even if they go 3-0, it's probably unlikely that they'll be able to slide into that 7 spot.
Yeah.
So, I mean, congratulations. You don't get swept by the Cavs in the first round. I mean,
yeah,
so
exactly.
I just, that Bulls, we don't – Wade is definitely out, right?
No, Wade could possibly return tonight for the Bulls.
So he's not out tonight. Is he gonna return? They want him to return before the postseason.
Yeah, correct.
So it's kind of like a Durant situation right now.
Yeah, pretty much.
And a little bit different of a talent scale, but in the Bulls' eyes, I think if they could get away from Cleveland, and we talk about this a lot, matchups and how teams face up going forward to avoid a certain team. I mean, I don't love discussing it, but I mean, if the Bulls are in that 7 slot, it's much they have a much better chance I think against the Celtics than they would against the Cavaliers.
Especially with the playoff experience of Dwayne Wade and Jimmy Butler and even Rajon Rondo. You have some vets on that team, and they're gonna make any series pretty difficult. The Cavs obviously will handle them, but like you said, one of those top 3 seeds not being the Cavs could really have issues maybe with Chicago.
I think they righted the ship a little bit. It was ugly there, and I mean, they didn't have the season I think they wanted to have, but they righted the ship a little bit.
Yeah, honestly, they're still a very confusing team. But talking about confusing teams, we'll talk about the Hawks, who are currently at the number 5 seed, coming off 2 big wins against the Cavs and the Celtics after they lost a ton of games, but whatever. And their next matchup is with the Cavs, which they'll probably lose. Then they'll face the Hornets and the Pacers. And they're at the 5 spot, so long as the Hawks pretty much win one game, they're in pretty good shape. But I think they would want to stay in that 5 spot and get a matchup with Washington.
Instead of Toronto.
Or Toronto. I mean, yeah, I think they don't really care, but I think they just want to be as high as possible and keep winning, because they had some bad momentum. And if they keep this good momentum they have and win a few games, that'd be a nice little, thing carrying into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think they, like they said, they want to continue to play well. They're one of the teams. Their matchup, they're not going to get the home court. It doesn't really concern them with seedings really if they fall to 6. But I think they just want to be playing, like you mentioned, better basketball and more consistent basketball.
Exactly, because they were playing so bad for so long that you kind of want to turn it around. So we looked at all their schedules: the Bulls, Pacers, Heat, Bucks, Hawks. So I would probably say Chicago has the easiest, with Miami probably having the hardest.
Yeah, Chicago can go as high as Chicago have an opportunity to pass Milwaukee.
They could pass Milwaukee potentially.
Yeah, that could, I think, benefit them.
Yeah, we didn't touch on the Bucks schedule. The Bucks schedule is the Sixers, the Hornets, and the Celtics. So I mean, the Sixers is probably a win. Hornets, they'll probably not. I don't think they're going to roll over. So that's like a 50-50 game, but I would give the Bucks the win, and then Boston, depending on what they're doing on the last game of the season, if there's seating available or not.
Yeah, but I'm interested to see what that Bucks team could do in the playoffs.
I don't think anybody really wants to play the Bucks going into the playoffs. They've had some nice momentum. They have some weird players, some unique lineups they can throw at you, and Giannis is a matchup nightmare for pretty much every team.
They have a shot. They definitely have a shot. I would
enjoy playing them the first round.
I think of any, if we looked at the 6, 7, 8, they'd have the best opportunity to advance into the next round of the underdog teams. Maybe I know we'd have to take a look at the West, but that's a team that, coming off what they did last year, has definitely made the bounce back that we thought that they could have.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I would agree with you. I think the Bucks would probably be my pick as one of the teams that we're talking about that could cause the most issues in the first round and get an upset. I think Jason Kidd could kind of throw out some unique matchups, some unique strategies at some of these players and steal a few games.
Agreed. And one other thing I wanted to point out about the East and the amount of games that the Cavs are going to win, or the 1 seed, whether it's the Celtics or Cavs, I'd have to take a look, but I would think that this would be the lowest number of wins for a 1 seed in quite some time.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and they've struggled. They'll get that win. They had a nice win, I think, against Boston this week, and everyone was like, "Oh, the Caps are fine." But then losing to the Hawks last night, and I don't think they intentionally try to lose games. So there's still some things they need to fix before going into the postseason and really being able to compete with teams deep in the playoffs and in the finals. I don't think they're going to get knocked out, but they definitely need to fix some things.
Well, I don't want to beat a dead horse with the product, but and everyone talks about this, but when LeBron comes out and says, don't talk to me about regular season games. I've been to 6 straight finals, and you've seen the quality of play for Cleveland, who has battled injuries, but to win what's probably going to be 52, 53 games, and a little bit of the coast, and but we did see what they're capable of and turning it on. So I would never, I think, fall victim to think anybody else is coming out of these. Sometimes we mentioned all year the biggest threat, and that's what everybody wants to talk about, because we want to see if anybody could get in the way of round 3 of Cavs Warriors and give a more validity to the regular season. But I think what we saw the other night was more of what we'll see in the postseason, and we'll see if anyone could kind of step up and try to get in the Kings' way.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But before we move off the East, if you had to pick out of the teams we talked about, who's going to be the one left out of the postseason?
The Heat.
Yeah, it's sad to say, but I agree. I think it's going to be the Heat, even though they had that crazy turnaround. But
And it's fun. It's crazy because Eric Spoelstra, for a long period of time, his name was mentioned in
Coach of the Year.
Coach of the Year candidate, which was well deserved. Went from 11-30 to whatever their record is right now, and did it with guys like Deion Waiters, and we knew Dragic and Whiteside would have good seasons and throughout the year were reliable fantasy players, but outside of those two guys, to get production from James Johnson and Tyler Johnson, it's a gritty, not crazy talented team that I think got the most out of their ability after the rough start.
Yeah, no, for sure. Eric Spoelstra done a great job, and we had a great article about Spoelstra as a Coach of the Year candidate, but would not making the playoffs. I think that'll take him out of contention. But still, if they had a better schedule, I might pick them, but just the schedule is so tough. To get the Wizards twice and the Cavs once, and you don't really know what these teams are going to be doing, if they're going to be resting. Because like Cleveland even, I think they'd probably prefer to keep the one seed and kind of prefer to fix the ship, but they could rest guys. I know Kyrie said he had a knee soreness last night, so.
Yeah, everybody's sore at this time of year, but I think if they rest guys, and Washington, I think will have something to play for. It's going to be tough. Miami's going to need some breaks because what are they out of the 8 right now? A game?
Yeah, exactly. They're a game out, and the other teams are in position to win at least 1 or 2 games. So it would have to. I think it would really have to be like a real like choke job by one of these other teams for the Heat to get in. Talking about the West a little bit, we got Denver and Portland still competing for that 8th seed, and that's a 1-game separation. And Denver's 1 game behind. Portland's in the 8th spot right now. Denver has OKC, the Mavs, OKC, and Portland has Jazz, Spurs, Pelicans.
And doesn't Portland have the tiebreak?
Yeah, I think they do. They won. I know they beat them recently. I think that gave them the tiebreaker.
So they're going to have to make up 2 games.
Yep. I think it's probably unlikely, but you never know because Portland's schedule is not friendly.
Yeah, they're going to have to probably go 3-0 because if they go 2-1, that would mean Portland would have to go 0-3.
Which could happen, though, because, I mean, the Jazz are still playing for their spot. They're only a game up on the Clippers. And then the Spurs, don't ever roll over for anybody.
Right.
And then the Pelicans.
That's true in a sense of if they're locked into the 2, they will know as we know, as I call them, they basically are the trendsetters, or they started the rest revolution as I refer to it. So the Spurs will have no problem sitting guys if they happen to lock up their seed.
But I would say this too is the Spurs system is so nice that they could probably still beat Portland with some guys rested. But it depends on who they rested and how many guys. And then the Pelicans, they kind of want to see what's going on. They want to get the best out of their season. I don't think they're going to just give up.
I got Portland.
Yeah, I got Portland too, but I wouldn't be like super surprised if they lost the next 3, but I think Dame Lillard will probably get them the win that they need to lock it up.
But I think both teams will get blown out by the Warriors, but I do think in a weird way that the Nuggets might push them a little harder than Portland could. I know Portland and Lillard's played well against the Warriors, and they've had some battles. And last year, obviously without Steph there was, Portland was either up in that series or was tied at one point, and then Steph came back. I just think that like Denver, that new fresh blood in the playoffs, if they happen to sneak in a miraculous fashion with some good bigs and some good size with Jokic and the rest of that crew, would be able to maybe get them deeper into a series than Portland could. Both teams will probably lose, but I don't know. We both kind of wanted to see what Denver could do in the playoffs because we know that what we've seen from Portland in the past would show the exit, the early exit for them.
Yeah, and I mean Portland's without Nurkic, so I think Denver would be a more interesting matchup, and they have, like you said, the size. I think that's kind of it. Wouldn't really scare Golden State, but it gives them a good test for later in the playoffs when they have to, battle against some of these other bigger teams.
Yeah, for sure. But I think we both
Other than that, the only other really movement in the West is two teams you mentioned a little bit before is the Jazz and the Clippers, and they're pretty much fighting for who has home court in their first round matchup.
Yeah, and that means a lot more to the Jazz than it does to the Clippers.
Agreed.
Because
Especially for a young, inexperienced playoff team, being at home definitely gives them some nice hype. And, the crowd is going to be excited to be back in the playoffs.
yeah, that city's been starved over the last few years to get back to those days where they were in the conference finals not too long ago with
Yeah.
Booker and Deron Williams, and
Yep.
that's a franchise that definitely has got some things to look forward to.
Yeah. What do you think? Like, I know you said that you were kind of interested in that matchup. What are you most interested in?
Well, just the intrigue is that the Clippers are, I think, on the verge of extinction, right?
Yeah, they are. I think that it's like do or die for them.
Yeah, and we know how the landscape of the playoffs can dictate, or the outcome of the playoffs, could dictate the future of some franchise. Like what happened with Durant is obviously the prime example, but there have been other examples of the way teams either finish. Sometimes you don't even have to go deep. Like what if the Clippers beat the Jazz and then took the Warriors to 7? It could change a lot of the narrative of where Paul would go, where Griffin would go. Would they keep it together? It's a big, obviously, postseason for them, and then it's a new, fresh, upcoming team. Has a team ever gone from being out of the playoffs to having home court like this? I mean, it's obviously happened before with trades and free agency, but this was a gradual buildup. This was from the bottom down. This wasn't a quick fix. This wasn't a free agent signing. This was a gradual buildup and a team that has done it the right way.
Well, I think the initial, like the one move for this team, the Jazz, that really put them in like the fast forward move to be a good team is when they traded Enes Kanter and they started Rudy Gobert and Derek Favors, and they really became like a lockdown defensive team. And they've been drafting pretty well for years. They've had some injuries. They haven't gone their way, but they have a lot of talent and they're going to have decisions to make with these young players going forward. But they still have other guys that are still in development like Rodney Hood, Dante Exum. So guys that are only going to get better. So it's crazy that this team, like you said, is kind of homegrown. They haven't really done a lot in free agency. I mean, they added a few veterans this past season that have helped out, like Boris Diaw and Joe Johnson. But it's nice to see a team kind of develop from the inside and still have pieces to get better because it's not like they've hit their ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's going to be looking at Thunder Rockets because of the 2 MVP candidates. And I've kind of been, I won't say confused, but I've gone back and forth a little bit, and I don't like the co-MVP talk stuff. I know we'll probably get into that, later episodes, but this matchup of Brody and the Beard is going to be something special. And like I told you guys last time, they have that award show into June. I still think that the MVP it's obviously decided on the regular season, and it should not be able to be impacted by things that happen in the playoffs. So I don't know whether the votes are due by a certain date, but I know
I'm pretty sure the votes are still due by like before the postseason starts.
Right, because that there would be no reason for that to impact. I mean, it would be kind of strange because I would have to look back, but when would be the last time that? I mean, these are two of the clear cut. I mean, these are the 1-2 guys. I mean, I know LeBron is in the conversation, but to have the two clear cut 1-2 guys in the vote face in the postseason, and the winner of this, you could very easily see Harden advance and Westbrook still win the award.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really likely scenario to happen, to be honest.
Or vice versa.
I guess vice versa
or
too.
Westbrook
I mean, you could
advance and Harden have win the award.
I mean, I'll save my prediction for the playoffs. We're gonna do. So you guys know we're gonna do an award show later on. Probably sometime next week. We're doing a playoff preview for the first round, East and West. So keep an eye out for that. But I'll save my thoughts for that. What did you think about the Suns not letting Westbrook get a triple-double last night?
This goes into the category of funky finishes and weird things that have happened in the league this year. And it's like the Stevenson stuff with the late basket and sportsmanship, and Devin Booker going for 70, Stevenson taking this layup. the disrespect. Is it sportsmanship? Is it bad sportsmanship? And this fascination with the triple double that has recently developed. I know now it's the record though, so this is a little different. This is not just an average, the run of the mill regular season triple double. This one is for number 42 in the record in a season. But the Suns were like hell bent on not allowing this to happen, to the point where they were fouling guys hard. That passes were coming from Westbrook, and Westbrook like feeding into it, like Westbrook like passing up wide open shots to kind of to get this thing over with. But I guess it means a lot to Westbrook, and it means a lot to the guys on the opposing teams that don't want to see the record fall against them.
Yeah, I think you're right. I guess like people are starting to not want to be the team that he got the record against. I know Westbrook probably is really into it. I know there was reports that he stayed after the game last night and continued to practice. So, I think he wants the record. He's right there.
Yeah. What do you mean he stayed? He just stayed after the workout?
Yeah, I think like shot around and stuff and worked out.
He's if I'm him, I would go for the assist early. I know they still have to I think they're pretty much still locked into the 6. I don't think it's going to get any better or worse for them. But if he wants it, it's going to have the assist should be the first thing to come, because it's kind of hard to prevent a guy from getting points and rebounds. But I think the assist is the easiest thing to dictate for the other team down the stretch, as weird as that sounds.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think especially if teams are going to try to do this, like they can't really prevent you from scoring points, because if they foul you, you're going to get to the line. And rebounding wise, you can just kind of go up and grab it. I would say assists, rebounds, and points last. It's the easiest for Westbrook to score points.
Yeah, he's going to get it. There's no doubt in my mind he's going to get it. He's already locked up the average of a triple double, and so I really believe he's going to get it. It's just that there have been, and there was another one with the Memphis and the Knicks game with somebody on the Grizzlies taking a 3 with the time run now at up 10. There have been some funky things going on at the end of these games.
Yeah, there has been, and that means that there's probably going to be a funky postseason, which will be awesome.
Fights, more fights.
Yeah, there has been plenty of fights and hate. And what was it like last week or a week ago? The JaVale McGee and Gorgie Dang got into it.
That one I don't think really Dang wanted much of.
Yeah, I don't know.
That was weird.
Yeah, there wasn't there wasn't much contact, and we've seen a lot worse things happen that people are like ready not to fight about.
I just think to me the Stevenson one takes the cake, just because DeRozan and Tucker are like barking at him, and he's just like walking by and just trying to like ignore it and get to the locker room. It's like most guys get barked at like that. It's an immediate altercation. It's just, I guess, Lance being Lance.
Yeah, he's just like not. He knows that they're trying to get him too. So that's smart job for him not getting into a fight.
Yeah, true. But I think this whole triple double thing, if it who's the Thunder play next, who their next opponent is. I don't know. We've looked at schedules. You didn't look at those. I think they got 3 games left, I want to say.
Yeah, 3 games left. I think they play the Nuggets next game.
So I think you could see teams like feel disrespected by it.
The Nuggets are a pretty good team to get it against. They play a pretty high pace, so I could definitely see him getting into this game and being done with it.
Yeah, he wants to get it over with and just focus on the playoffs now.
For sure.
He is going to be a force to be reckoned with in that series. It's going to be fun to watch him, and it would be kind of crazy if he went all the way to 41, then just went 4 games without one and didn't get it.
I mean, it could happen. It's not ludicrous, but that wraps it up for today. Thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you again Wednesday. We'll probably be starting to talk about some more playoff stuff.
Yeah, I think Wednesday is
last game of the regular season.
That's true, and that's going to lead us into the best time of the year. So looking forward to it, man.